In some of my most recent videos, I've talked about all of the shotguns and flare guns that Pyro can use and what the best use for each kind would be. Some for pure damage output, some for team support, and some for added mobility. The question that all Pyro players have popped up into their mind at one point or another is, what is the better of the two? Should I use a shotgun or a flare gun? There's no doubt about it that each has an advantage over the other, but what would be the best kind of weapon overall? Well, it's subjective and can only really be based on the situation most of the time. Last time I compared these two different styles of secondary weapons, I only talked about both the stock shotgun and the original flare gun, when in reality I should have talked about the other ones as well. Now I will only be talking about the normal flare gun and stock shotgun, because the other secondary Pyro weapons are too varied to be compared in the way I want to compare them in. What the hell are you talking about, past me? That makes no sense. The other shotguns and flare guns are pretty much crucial to this argument. Are you insane? What was I thinking? Getting back on topic now, the shotgun for the Pyro is the base choice. It's given to every beginner Pyro and holds 6 shots per clip with 32 reserve ammo. This is great to fight against those enemies who like to stay out of your primary weapon's range, and deals pretty decent damage to boot. Now with it being a secondary choice, this means it's not your first choice when fighting enemies. I mean, it's quite literally in the title of the kind of weapon it is. Pyro being a close range class makes the shotgun a necessary addition, as this allows them to still be useful even when they can't get close enough to use their flamethrowers. So how do you remedy this? You go with the flare gun. That's right, with 16 ammo, the flare gun deals 30 damage per shot and deals afterburn damage for 6 seconds after the initial hit. Not only that, the flare gun hit will deal critical damage, 90 damage to be exact, when you attack a burning enemy. The flare itself travels at 2000 hammer units a second, even faster than a direct hit rocket, meaning it can travel pretty far even with the downward trajectory curve. Even though it has one general ammo pool, the flare gun has to reload after every shot, unlike the shotgun that automatically reloads after emptying all 6 shots. Now what does the flare gun do that the shotgun can't? That's easy, long range combat. The flare is pretty useful at any range as long as you can aim properly. This is especially handy for Pyro because it nullifies one of their biggest downsides, meaning you can do good to great damage to enemies far away. The problems mainly arise in places that stop fire from being effective and the different way it works from shotguns. This is a good time to finally look at the differences between the two and show what each one does better than the other. For starters, the shotgun attacks with hit scan, meaning as long as your crosshair is on your enemy and random bullet spread is on your side, you will do damage. As for the flare gun, the flare's shot counters projectiles, meaning that as a Pyro you will have to aim your shots. Now don't panic, this isn't as bad as it sounds as the speed it travels allows for fairly simple aiming for the most part, and does the same amount of damage regardless of where you hit them. This means that as long as you hit them, you will either do 30 damage or 90 damage if they're already ignited, even if they're on the other side of the map. The shotgun will need to be used at mid to close range to be effective at all. Yes, this is where the Pyro does well in general, but once you're outside of effective range, this won't be much use outside of chip damage. That being said, the shotgun works better for more constant damage. As I've said, the shotgun has more ammo in the clip and reserve than the flare gun has overall. You can shoot 6 times with the shotgun before reloading, but with the flare you will have to make the shot count as you're left wide open if attacking from long range. With the shotgun you effectively have 5 more chances to attack before needing to reload, making it much better to do constant damage regardless of your distance from the enemy for the most part. The way you play Pyro is pretty important to what you decide to choose as well. The flare gun works fantastically with the degreaser with its faster deploy and holster speed. This allows the Pyro to switch much quicker and attack with flares to do a quick burst of damage. This is typically what is referred to as combo Pyro and lets the Pyro do tons of damage quicker. Of course this is still doable with other primaries, but the degreaser outdoes any other choice. Now what does the shotgun work with? Well, pretty much anything. That's right, the shotgun is just that reliable. More shots and more damage up close, which Pyro excels at, makes it work with any flamethrower. In fact, I'd say the shotgun works better than the flare gun due to the better mid-range damage and the fact that you don't have to aim as much, oddly enough. The shotgun is also usable on more than just Pyro too, which leads nicely into my next point. How good is each weapon against other classes? The shotgun is great against the bulkier classes like Soldier and Demoman with how effective it is up close. The flare gun though is superb against low health classes like Scout and Sniper, as attacking for a second with your primary and then using the puff and sting tactic of shooting a flare straight after can essentially take them out in one swift move. The shotgun can work well against them, but with the guaranteed 90 damage from flares on burning enemies, this is a better choice for those kinds of enemies. There's one class however that the shotgun is the absolute better choice against, and that's against another Pyro. Wow BonOakley, thanks for the obvious info, I would have never knew that. Shh, let me finish. At first glance, the shotgun would seem to be better against other Pyros, right? The fact that they can't be set on fire in normal circumstances make the hit scan bullet the first choice due to the shotgun being effective on literally everyone. This is true. However, the flare gun is still effective on other Pyros. How, you ask? Well, you can flare punch them. I've mentioned this before in a different video, but for ease I'll tell you here as well. This is where you manipulate the flames to linger on the enemy Pyro longer, giving you time to switch and flare punch them, doing the 90 critical hit damage. Now, would I recommend this over the shotgun? Not really. I'd still say the shotgun is the better choice against another Pyro, but that's not to say the flare gun is useless against other Pyros. It just takes a little more time and dare I say, skill to pull off well. Not to mention that if they react fast enough, the enemy Pyro can reflect it back at you or your teammates, so you run the risk of damaging others if you try to do this. So overall, we've determined that the shotgun is great at mid to close range and doesn't require as much aim as the flare gun does due to its hit scan nature. It has better ammo conservation overall and is effective against all classes regardless. The flare gun, however, is great at all range and cancels out one of the Pyro's biggest weaknesses, long range combat. While it has to reload after every shot, it excels at taking out classes with low health pools with the puff and sting tactic and can still do so against other Pyros by flare punching. How about the other shotgun and flare gun choices though? They each have something unique to offer compared to the originals, right? Well, that's true on the flare gun side. The shotguns aren't as obvious. The reserve shooter does the same amount of damage as stock with the addition of switching to it faster and mini-critting airborne targets. This however comes with the downside of having 2 less shots per clip, meaning you'll have to make shots count a lot more than stock. This shows that it can be more effective against flying targets like soldiers, demo men, which I mentioned earlier, and also jetpack Pyros, but to be honest that won't be that handy. The additional damage against those classes are nice, but it only comes into play in certain situations, so it's not active all the time. Plus it's only against a third of the roster. The panic attack on the other hand seemingly excels at being a better close range shotgun than the stock shotgun. While doing less damage than the other two choices, having more bullets in each shot makes the panic attack do more damage than them, with the shots being in a fixed pattern. It also has faster switch to speed than even the reserve shooter, but it will become less accurate with each successive shot, meaning you'll need to have a little downtime between each shot to make the shots consistent. Like I said, the panic attack could be labelled the meta shotgun choice due to it excelling close range with those current stats. 108 max damage instead of the other two's 90 max damage helps against all classes and can be more effective than crit flare shots against classes with small health pools. It doesn't do as well at mid range and especially not long range, as it basically becomes chip damage at that point. However, that being said, you're a Pyro. Close range is your jam, so the panic attack will be very good when used correctly. With the other two shotguns, this shows that overall they're great to do big damage at close ranges and can also be deployed faster even without the degreaser, making them even more viable with any primary of your choice. This makes them a safe choice no matter what playstyle you decide to use. The flare guns are more of a mixed bag to be honest. The detonator can well detonate flares mid-flight and mini-crit instead of fully crit burning enemies like the original flare gun. While this is useful for hitting multiple enemies, it also increases the Pyro's mobility by quite a bit, allowing them to make similar jumps to what the soldier and demo can perform, just not as far. This is great for flying through the sky and reaching places that Pyro couldn't reach before or would have had to find a different way to get to. The Man Melter is more of a support type flare gun oddly enough. It travels 50% faster than the flare gun at 3000 hammer units overall. It doesn't require ammo at all, meaning it has an unlimited clip. This is pretty jarring though, as there isn't any kind of animation to even indicate that you're reloading your shot, so this is really odd in general. One upside the other flares don't give you is crits on demand, at least when you extinguish your teammates with the secondary ability it has. You can store up to 35 crits, but this of course requires the enemy team to run a Pyro, and you could always extinguish with your primary. However, I'd still say this is a solid choice if you don't want to waste your flamethrower ammo, and hitting 90 solid damage in one go is pretty neat, but you can't crit burning enemies, so honestly while having a ton of cool features, the Man Melter is very situational. Finally, the Hellspawn itself, the Scorch Shot, is an area denial tool above everything. I mean, unless you just use it as a spam weapon. If you do, why? And you seriously wonder why people think Pyro requires no skill. Not saying that you can't use it like this, but you won't be liked very much if you do. Anyway, let's talk about its best use. Just like the detonator, it will mini crit burning enemies instead of full crit, and when it hits an enemy directly, it will knock the enemy back, drop to the floor and explode on impact. The knockback is increased if the enemy is already aflame, so it can be great to deny advancing enemies. It however does 35% less damage and self-damage force, which can give slightly more mobility like the detonator, but not as much. You can see why people spam it, right? It's great to stop enemies from getting close, but it can be too overwhelming, making most people see it as a low skill weapon. And that's every differ in flare gun from the original. This makes your options for the flares give great burst damage against low health classes, more mobility for less damage with flare punches, supporting teammates with the reward of crits on demand, and spam McGee, area denial with slightly more mobility than normal but less damage. An interesting bunch to say the least, but as a collective they don't seem to stick to one specific use. Don't get me wrong, mobility and area denial are great tools for the Pyro to have, it's just weird that they're so varied overall. Now that we have the specifics down for all of the shotguns and flares, let's compare them all to properly see what each kind of weapon has that makes them better than the other. The shotguns overall emphasize power and help with this by having the majority incentivize use with their faster deployment speed at the cost of less successive shots or ammo in each clip. At the base level, shotguns are fantastic and show off Pyro's close range capabilities excellently. The flare guns overall incentivize use against low health classes with their abilities to take them out quickly, as well as help negate the Pyro's biggest flaw by providing long range usability. They also provide additional mobility for the Pyro, and unlike the thermal thruster, they can still be used as an actual weapon as well. Along with this, they can extinguish teammates for some reason, but it's there. And finally, they can deny the enemy team from advancing, as well as knock them back if they're already on fire. Yeah, as you can see, this really shows how cluttered the many flare gun choices are compared to the shotguns. They provide a lot without really focusing in on one area. At this point, it'd be fairly silly to ask for any major changes to the flare guns considering the amount of time since the last major update. There's always that glimmer of hope, but honestly, I doubt changing them would be one of their top priorities, and honestly, I don't think I'd want them to do anything. The flare gun's multitude of uses is what makes them great choices and lends themselves to pretty much any Pyro playstyle overall. But before what I think beats what, let's get controversial. That's right, even more controversial than Fem Pyro. I'm talking opinions, and what better opinions to receive than that of fellow Pyro mains. That's right, I'm going real low here, bottom of the TF2 barrel. So I'll stop talking and let them state their thoughts on each group. Take it away, guys.
Shotguns or flare guns has always been an interesting choice for Pyro mains around the fire pit. Essentially, I believe it comes down to reliability versus damage output. On the one hand, with shotguns, you have a far more reliable hit scan weapon that can help you out in any kind of a pinch provided your aim is true. It may seem a bit standard, but it gets the job done. Flare guns, on the other hand, are far less reliable, but can be an extremely deadly tool in the right hands. With just 2 well-aimed flares, you can deal massive damage, and even if you miss that second shot, the ability to light someone on fire from afar is still infinitely useful. Naturally, an experienced player with a flare gun can take full advantage of the sacred flare punch. But even then, it's still not great for close combat, other pyros, and the rare underwater encounter, leaving it balanced with the shotgun in even the hands of a pro. That all being said, personally I prefer the flare gun due to an affinity I got for it, as it was one of my first items I got when I installed the game 10 years ago, and I like to think I'm somewhat of a savant with it, even though I very likely am not. But I say, really, it's up to you. You can't really go wrong with most of Pyro's secondaries, except the gas passer, which is literally the worst item in the game.
Alright, well, asking me to compare flare guns and shotguns is like asking me to compare apples to oranges. I am admittedly very biased towards shotguns, as they best suit my own playstyle, but it's not to say that I don't think the flare guns have their uses. Like, the quick burst of damage from the standard flare gun is great if it can be pulled off, and it definitely proves that Pyro mains can aim. Thank you. But in a pinch, when you really need burst damage, like right now, the flare gun, in my opinion, doesn't help keep you alive when you're toe-to-toe with other players. The scorch shot, on the other hand, is more helpful thanks to the splash damage it can deal out and the knockback effect on a direct. It's a great choice for pyros who don't have the pinpoint accurate talent required for the flare gun, but arguably the scorch shot can be a bit too forgiving. The secondary bounce, for example, is what I believe pushes the scorch over the edge in terms of balance, making it a tad too OP. So the scorch shot is forgiving for sure. As for the man melter, well, I honestly don't use it so much to base an honest opinion on it. I personally don't see a use for it, but another pyro player may tell me I'm wrong. That one's about personal opinion. The stock shotgun, however, is by far the first choice in combat for me. It fits every aspect of my playstyle, and while random bullet spread can be an annoyance, in a close combat situation, which is Pyro's comfort zone, it's a perfect go-to for ranged damage that your flamethrower cannot reach, being a finisher or just straight up scaring away low health enemies. The panic attack though is a fun one, especially when paired with the degreaser. pretty much enables you to dual wield, sneaking in a shotgun hit while your flames are lingering. Pulling it off effectively takes practice, but it sure is a rewarding playstyle. Overall, all my yammering measures up to me expressing my biased opinion that shotguns are more superior to the different flare guns, despite what they bring to the battlefield. But it's all up to personal preference. Don't just take my word on it, try it out for yourselves and see what suits you. Risemonger, signing out.
Hey, it's me, Pyro YouTuber and bad role model Sharkface. I played Pyro for quite a while and the discussion of flares versus shotguns amongst the Pyro main player base is about as divisive as Hawaiian pizza. So here's a very brief take on it from me to simplify it as much as possible. Both subsections of weapon are designed to give the Pyro the aim reward based punch that's natural to so many other classes, but different weapons go about this in their own way. The base flare gun gives you a high burst of damage on burning targets and a ranged option on a class that is otherwise pretty screwed against anyone that's social distancing from you. Shotguns give you a more sustained burst damage option to quickly clean up fights and deal damage at a range that Pyro is already pretty home to. It's a useful tool when fire damage doesn't cut it, and that's a lot of the time. In my experience, and as a recommendation, shotguns are great for defense and flares are great for offense. Both can be used on either side of course, but the sustained high damage at mid-range on a shotgun is great when your enemies have to come to you, and the flare gun's high range allows you to push up with your team and do more than just stand there defending them or flanking. Variants of the flare guns and shotguns often sacrifice an aspect of their function for the benefit of others. For example, the detonator gives you mobility and more ranged options with a manual detonation, but loses a lot of its punch. The panic attack is fantastic for high burst damage, but grows weaker with sustained use, and the scorch shot sacrifices your soul to the devil so that you can remove the snipers on the other side of the map. My advice is try to learn them from an attacking or defending perspective. Try out all your options and get comfortable. Learn what situations call for what weapons, as knowledge of your arsenal is key to good Pyro gameplay. And use the detonator, it is really, really good.
So what do you want me to say at this point? That the shotgun is better or that the flare gun is better? You know it's going to be the cop-out answer of each one has its uses in certain situations, but honestly, the flare guns do have the slight advantage due to how much they can do as a collective, how they negate one of the major Pyro's weaknesses, and one of the major components in combo Pyro. As much as I love the shotguns, I have to give this point to the flare guns as a whole. They just provide more overall. Like I said, I much prefer the shotguns as they give more firepower up close, plus I don't have to aim as much. However, the flare guns just beat them in general, as sad as I am to admit that. Now, that's not to say that the shotguns don't have their use. They totally work well when there's a scout up in your face or you need to quickly chip away at that retreating engineer. The shotgun choices are solid, no doubt. They give the Pyro a shotgun at first for a reason, but surprised to say, just because they focus a few aspects unlike the flare gun, they come off as bland in comparison, and that's coming from a shotgun Pyro. Again, I acknowledge that the flare guns have the upper hand in most areas, but it won't stop me from running stock or the panic attack because they're great choices. But what about your guys' thoughts? Do you run a shotgun or a flare gun? What do you think is better? Let me know down below, and hey, if you enjoyed this video then drop a like and a subscribe, it really does help. And that about does it for this one. This has been your Pyro enthusiast BonOakley signing out. See you guys in the next one.
It seems that you have successfully completed this video. So why not watch some more? Thanks so much for your support. See you all